alive!
Woo! Happy Stranger Things Day.
It's November.
It's November. We survived.
We survived, yes. Somehow.
Cheers to the chocolate.
Some way, somehow, something, we survived. I won't promise that we're coherent, but we survived.
Chocolate. And a cat to distract you all.
You gonna say hi, Mr. Nico? You say hello? So, anyways, I think it's just gonna be us tonight, as in us in the
Facebook world.
The Facebook world. Our friends at the Vibe Radio Network / Blog Talk Radio seem to be offline tonight. Could not get a hold of them. So, we will not be waiting for them to tune in tonight. It will just be us.
There we go.
And I need to...
You need to mute that.
Need to mute that badly. There we go. Muted. Alright, good deal.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So tonight's bevy is spiced rum and apple cider because it's apple cider season.
Yes, it is. Cheers, everybody.
Ooh. A little bit tart after that York peppermint patty.
That does taste good.
Doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Don't eat the peppermint patty right beforehand.
No.
Not a candy.
I suspected that would not be a good idea.
Nope, no, it wasn't. I was not thinking. All right, so yeah, Chris and I survived in October.
Yep.
As did most of the rest of our guides. A couple of them are still recovering.
So it's been 3 weeks since we last chatted with you, and we're kind of, sort of, somewhat gonna get back on a regular schedule.
I think so.
We'll be back again in 2 weeks. We'll talk about that at the end of the show. Then it will be a little disrupted for holidays and whatnot, but we still have plans for the...
There will still be 2 in December. They're just going to be slightly off.
Yep. But in any case, so yeah, tonight we are picking back up the
state theme.
The state theme, yes. We are going to be going to Oklahoma. Yep. But anyway, so yeah, we have, before we dive right in, I hope everybody had a good Halloween.
Yes.
And hard to believe that it's already been almost a week. It'll be a week tomorrow. Since our beloved holiday.
Yes.
A week ago tonight, I was giving a talk to a wonderful crowd up at Covenant Woods.
He actually met the great-granddaughter of the gentleman who built Haunt's headquarters.
Yeah, so
that was kind of cool.
I think now I'm a little confused because admittedly I did wind up going back in doing a little digging, and while I did find a document that said that he was here at 209 North 25th Street, his obituary says that he passed away in his house at 207 North 25th Street, which is next door. So I'm confused.
Neighbor. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. But, met a couple that had lived in the Libby house up there on Libby Hill Park. They had lived there for 40 years.
Got some stories.
Yep.
Got some stories.
Yeah, so, it was a good evening there. And then, of course, we had a wonderful Halloween. We had trick-or-treaters come by, and they could come by and see the Halloween tree-themed decorations that Beth put together.
The parents were very happy for the hand-warming fire that we had going, and that they got treats too, because parents deserve treats as well on that day.
Yep.
And then, I started taking down decor 2 days later, because everything is now down except for our wreath, and I've started dressing our skellies for next scene, which part of it will start going up this month.
Yep. No spoilers yet. No spoilers.
Although those of you who are friends with me on Facebook already saw 2 of the things that are going up.
Yeah. But
anyway.
We'll get there. Yeah. But so other than that, it was a crazy month. Crazy last 3 weeks, of course. Ghost walks at night. We're up at Hanover Tavern.
Yep.
Of course, there were ghost tours here in Richmond every night. So, yeah.
This is our first night we don't have a ghost tour going since the beginning of October.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like... Really? We don't have to be anywhere besides with you guys?
Yeah, we'll take it. Because, we like doing this with y'all. If we didn't, we wouldn't be here, because, I mean...
And apparently Vincent now,
That's Nico.
or Nico now needs to be...
Has opinions.
Yeah, okay. Alright, so Dana did tell us his birthday is next month. So happy early birthday, Dana.
Yep, we'll be hit back here again a couple of times before that, I think. So, yeah.
And yes, Patrick, the Halloween tree from Ray Bradbury book and movie.
That's the one.
I did a full tribute. The 8-foot skeleton was Mountroud.
You did a very good job with it, too.
I was very pleased with this one.
Yeah, so... But yeah, so alright, now we can go ahead. I feel like we've done our little recap, and we're ready to go ahead and dive into our theme for the evening, which again, Haunted Oklahoma. So, now, Oklahoma, for many, they might consider it to be a bit of a flyover state, particularly if you live on the east or the west coast. But those who would dismiss it so quickly would be missing out on a land that is deep, that has a very deep and complex heritage, as well as many haunting tales. Now, despite its location in the center of the country, Oklahoma was the 46th state to join the country, decades after many of its surrounding neighbors. Now, this was largely because of the heavily debated question about how to handle the official status of the land that was granted to the 5 tribes that had been forcibly relocated to this tract of land in the 1830s. Now, the question was controversially resolved with the establishment of statehood in 1907. In the years since, the status of the various tribal lands has been argued in the courts many times over, and today much of modern Oklahoma stands as federally recognized tribal land. Aside from the history of the native tribes, Oklahoma also maintains a deep history in relation to the cattle drives that once crossed the state and the oil industry that struck it rich alongside neighboring Texas to the south. Its nickname of the Sooner State is derived from those who staked claims to land before the federal government officially declared that the non-tribal parts of Oklahoma were open to settlers in one of the last great land rushes. And one would be mistaken to imagine Oklahoma as a vast land of open nothingness, as alongside the prairies that it's best known for, you'll find vast forests, highlands, and mountains, giving literal texture to this land's culture. So let's take a dive into the haunts of this historic landscape as we peek into some of Oklahoma's most noted landmarks. Me? You? Me? Okay. Alright, so we are first going to go ahead and start in the city of Guthrie, just to the north of Oklahoma City in central Oklahoma. Here we have the Stone Lion Inn, built in 1907 by Mr. F.E. Houghton for his family. The impressive mansion has an area of 8,000 square feet and 4 floors. At the time of completion, it cost $11,900 and was the most expensive home in Guthrie. It became the Smith Funeral Home in the 1920s, and in 1986 the property was purchased by Becky Luker and renovated and converted into a bed and breakfast. Visitors to the inn will experience the life of the people who lived in the gracious mansion, complete with servants. The mansion has upstairs rooms and a library and a parlor, on the first level. Dinner can be enjoyed in the oak-paneled dining room, and the cook can also be seen preparing meals in the French kitchen with its 200-year-old French country kitchen table, which can also seat 10 people. The mansion's elegant interiors feature leaded glass bookshelves, bathrooms with clawfoot tubs, 3 fireplaces, and huge pocket doors. Guests can choose from 6 suites to stay in, each beautifully decorated in a different theme. Known for its murder mystery weekends, Stone Lion Inn also makes a creative event venue. Every Friday and Saturday night, up to 40 guests participate as characters in a murder mystery complete with a 7-course dinner. As beautiful, fun, and unique as the Stone Lion Inn is, a stay here can be a frightful experience, as a mischievous ghost child has been seen and felt throughout the home. The spirit, said to be that of 8-year-old Irene Houghton, has been known to squeeze the toes of sleeping guests, or even crawl into bed with them. The eerie tap, tap, tap of a child's footsteps has also been heard leading from the 2nd floor to the 3rd. According to legend, the 8,000-square-foot home was where the child met her fate when a nurse overdosed her with cough syrup containing opium. The family later moved on, but little Augusta refused to leave. After the Houghton family moved out, the home changed into a boarding house and then a funeral home. Paranormal investigative teams have encountered several other ghosts, including a strong male entity who lingers in the basement where the morgue once was. When Becky Luker purchased the home in 1986, she planned to renovate it to its former glory. However, the spirits who lived there were not at all pleased with the renovations. While the renovation project was ongoing, unexplained noises were heard. Loud footsteps were reported coming from the back staircase in the early hours of the morning. Doors would open and close by themselves, and the police were often called for fear that there were intruders. It was not long until Becky came to the realization that her intruders were not of this world. The third floor is said to be the hot spot of several ghostly activities. It is here that Becky's son would put away his toys at night, only to find them all scattered about in the morning. Augusta's father, F.E. Houghton, has also been seen many times throughout the house, huffing and puffing on his tobacco pipe. It seems that though the Houghton family may have physically moved on from the premises, their spirits may still linger on at their beloved home. If you're looking to take a haunting trip to the Sooner State, a stay at the Stone Lion Inn might make a good place for you to start.
Alright, so moving on from Guthrie, we're going to pop over to Tulsa, to the Gilchrist Museum. Now, the Gilchrist Museum was founded in 1949 as a private museum by a Tulsa oil man named Thomas Gilchrist. He lived from 1890 to 1962. Now, he had amassed the nation's most comprehensive collection of the art of the American West, as well as major collections of historical documents and artifacts. American art historian Richard Saunders once called Gilchrist Museum a kind of Smithsonian institution of the American West. Although a powerful tribute, Saunders' comment only hints at the museum's ongoing impact and influence. Born in Robbeline, Louisiana in 1890, Thomas was the oldest of 14 children born to William and Elizabeth Gilchrist, a couple of Scots, Irish, French, and Muskogee or Creek Indian ancestry. Soon after his arrival, the Gilchrist family moved to the Creek Nation in Oklahoma Territory, where Thomas enjoyed a rural childhood and developed an insatiable curiosity about the natural world around him. Raised on the gospel of work, as a boy he helped tend the Gilchrist family's field and store. Although his formal education was somewhat limited, a love of reading encouraged a lifelong affair with history, especially that related to the American Indians. Thomas Gilchrist's name was entered in on the Creek tribal rolls when he was 9 years old. Tribal membership made Gilchrist eligible for a 160-acre allotment of land, fortuitously located within the famed Glen Pool oil field, the scene of the first major discovery of petroleum in Oklahoma in 1905. By 1917, more than 30 wells dotted Gilchrist's property, and the income from which had enabled him to further his education at Bacone College in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and at an Emporium, Kansas Teachers College. Married to Belle Harrow in 1808 and the father of 2 sons, Thomas founded his own oil exploration company in 1922. 3 years later, the successful oil man embarked on a trip to Europe that would change his life forever. The journey exposed him to the wealth and grandeur of Old World culture, and it also whetted his appetite for art collecting. Knowing he couldn't compete with well-established collectors of European masters, Gilchrist embarked on a different, more personal course. He looked at his own heritage for inspiration and resolved to create a collection of fine objects that reflected the breadth of Native American history and culture. In 1937, Gilchrist moved his company headquarters to San Antonio, Texas, to be closer to his major fields of operation. Therefore, after he became more active as a collector, and in 1942 he formed the Thomas Gilchrist Foundation, in part to facilitate his ongoing collection interests, but also to support the philanthropic efforts as education for the Native Americans. The following year, he acted on a long-held desire to establish a museum where he could exhibit his treasures for the public. Art historians generally consider this display, located at Gilchrist's company headquarters in San Antonio, to be the first museum ever devoted to Western American art. During the early 1930s, Gilchrist made steady additions to his collection, which eventually broadened to include books, manuscripts, and artifacts, as well as art. Although his oil business had flourished in the previous decade, Gilchrist's marriage to Belle Haro had not, and in 1926 the couple divorced. 2 years later, the entrepreneur married Norma Smallwood, a former Miss America. The second union produced a daughter, but within a few years of this union, it also failed. A string of remarkable acquisitions would vault Gilchrist to the forefront of Western Americana collectors by the end of the decade. The first of these was the purchase of a Dr. Philip G. Cole's incomparable Western art collection in 1944. It was also the most important. Widely regarded as the single greatest acquisition of Western art of all time, the transaction netted the Oklahoman some 636 works of art, as well as books, photographs, and associated archival material. The purchase included a number of Frederick Remington's paintings and what has been the first finest collection of works by Charles M. Russell, assembled during the artist's lifetime. After completing the Cole purchase, Gilchrist collected, quickening at a dizzying pace. In 1948 alone, the collector landed several major prizes, among them the estate of noted landscape painter Thomas Moran. This acquisition includes some 2,000 works of art, including many exquisite watercolors of the Yellowstone region of Montana and Wyoming. Also archival material that helped reveal Moran's creative process. That same year, Gilchrist completed negotiations for the purchase of an important collection of art and correspondence of George Catlin, the first artist to travel extensively among the tribal peoples of the American West. He also snapped up several romantic depictions of American fur trade and plain Indian life painted in the 1930s by Alfred Jacob Miller. The acquisition of noteworthy paintings such as prominent American artists as Winslow Homer, John Singer Sargent, and James McNeill Whistler reflected his discriminating eye for quality and impulse to collect distinguished works outside of his declared areas of interest, lent both breadth and content to the Western American focus of his collection. On periodic forays into his famous artist colony in Taos, New Mexico, Gilchrist developed friendships with and purchased paintings directly from several artists, including Ernest Blumschen and Bert Phillips. He acquired some 200 works from the prolific Joseph Henry Sharp alone, not to mention the fine collection of Indian artifacts the artist had gathered over the years to use as props in his work. Gilchrist also extended his encouragement and support to promising young Native American artists, collecting and commissioning work by A.C. Blue Eagle, Woody Crumbo, and Willard Stone, among others. Despite his spectacular achievements as a collector in the 1940s, San Antonians never mustered much enthusiasm for his museum. Disappointed by their apathy, the founder closed the display in 1947, only after a few years of operation. Undeterred by his failure in Texas, he moved the collection back to Tulsa, where he placed it in a new museum adjacent to his own modest sandstone home west of downtown. The founder opened the new facility called it the Thomas Gilchrist Museum in May of 1949. Besides securing stunning artworks, the Oklahoman got thousands of rare books, manuscripts, and documents, including rare volumes documenting the age of exploration, and created an impressive collection of early atlases and maps. An interest in the Spanish and Mexican influence on American history led him to acquire more than 100,000 pages of Hispanic source material, some of it dating from the 16th century. The importance of this cache of the written word included documents related to famous explorers such as Christopher Columbus, Hernan Cortez, Hernando de Soto, but also the Spanish Inquisition in the Americas. Among Gilchrist's prizes were the contents of the Freedom Train, which was the late 1940s and early 1950s toured in the United States with a display of rare documents, including a certified copy of the Declaration of Independence and Articles of Confederation, once owned by Frederick the Great, and a letter written by Thomas Jefferson on July 2nd of 1776. Although he continued to collect at a torrid pace, the oil revenues that Gilchrist depended on to finance his acquisitions began to lag by 1953. The overextended collector found that he was financially strapped and unable to pay some $2.5 million that he owed to business associates and to galleries and art brokers for various acquisitions. As he began to look for a way out of his difficulties, several suitors for his collection emerged. To fend off the entries for competitors and to keep the art collection intact, the city of Tulsa organized a successful bond issue in 1954, designed to pay for the older man's debts and secure his treasures for the community. Gilchrist transferred the title of his collection the following year, and the museum was renamed the Thomas Gilchrist Institute of American History and Art. In 1958, the founder deeded the museum buildings to the community along with more than 13 acres of land. Despite his financial troubles, Gilchrist never lost his passion for collecting or for his collection. And his economic position improved in the late 1950s. He continued to acquire rare Western Americana, and although the field became increasingly crowded with eager collectors, an ongoing fascination with archaeology and ethnology led him to sponsor several field excavations of Indian mounds in the Mississippi Valley. The objects acquired from his digs and other posts in 1955 and his other post-1955 collecting efforts, eventually reached the museum through a request after Gilchrist's death of a heart attack in May of 1962.
I actually edited this down too. I thought I edited it down more than that. He was quite the collector.
Whew!
And the collection that he has amassed is
massive.
It's truly impressive. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's the largest ever collected. Again, the museum has over 100,000 rare books, manuscripts, other archival material, plus all the painting, plus all the artifacts. I mean, it's...
largest collection of Western American art ever assembled. And it's there right on the edge of Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah. I kind of want to go see this museum.
I do too, except,
it closed.
Well, we'll get there.
Yeah.
Not permanently. Spoiler alert.
So before continuing further, we must note that the museum that he founded closed in 2021, slated for demolition and reconstruction of a new museum on the same site. The new museum is intended to better curate and preserve the astounding cultural collection that was founded in his lifetime. But before that original structure closed, it had earned a haunting reputation, and it was well renowned among paranormal investigators as well as for its art collection.
So, now for the spooky stuff.
Yeah.
After
I skipped 2 paragraphs, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have
anyway
done a little more choppy on my editing on there.
Strange whispers in the dark, mysterious slamming of doors, and the long-deceased Tulsa oil man could be found all at the museum. It was rumored to have a high turnover for security guards. I'm going to be kind of curious if that continues.
I'm very curious to see if that continues.
A collector until his death, it seems like Thomas wouldn't let death separate him from his beloved art. He was often spotted wandering the grounds of his original rock house, referred to as Tom's Place, during his lifetime. The oil man also seemed to enjoy a stroll along the museum garden pathways leading to his remains, which of course were housed within a mausoleum on the grounds. Did they move that?
As far as I know, that still remains.
Okay. Just, the inquiring mind wants to know.
I would imagine, I think it was just the museum, not his mausoleum.
Yeah, because they'd have to, actually move him.
Yeah.
So... anyway, so mausoleum supposedly still there. Visitors to the gardens may also spot several ghosts of Native American children running throughout the gardens, as well as the original house used to be an orphanage when Gilchrist was away on business. Terry French of Tulsa Spirit Tours confirms that Gilchrist was probably one of the most haunted locations in all of Oklahoma, in all of Tulsa. French and her team investigated the museum a handful of times, and every experience became memorable. French took tours there, and people in the groups had paranormal experience almost every single time they went. She recalled cameras would fail, cell phones would shut off, or just wouldn't work. And it was just weird. She said, "We never turned the bus off because we were afraid at one point we wouldn't be able to get it started again. And it was in perfect working order." French believes that Gilchrist's house being built with sandstone played a huge part. She said, like quartz, sandstone carries a lot of energy that helps manifest things that were happening in the house. They have tried having things in the house, like children doing art appreciation classes, but they never last very long. It's rumored that Gilchrist is the one who stayed behind to look over his art. According to French, however, he's not a fan of visitors, apparently. She said that even animals are afraid of lurks in this house. A couple of years back, they installed a bunch of new security cameras. They kept going off in the south bedroom one evening. Police were called. They came out with trained police dogs, and when they tried to go up the stairs, the dogs absolutely refused to go. They started whimpering, they wouldn't budge, they ran out of the house. And when the police went up there themselves, not a living soul was in that area. While I cannot claim to be more of an expert about the Gilchrist than Terry French, I must say I have some doubts about Thomas Gilchrist staying on as a menacing spirit in his museum. One of the main reasons he moved his collection from San Antonio to Tulsa was so that more people would come and see it. So it's probably something older that might be attached to the landscape, or perhaps something that was attached to one of the items in the vast collection. As far as hauntings are concerned, we'll be amongst the ones eagerly awaiting news as to whether the spirits attempt to make themselves at home in the new state-of-the-art museum.
Mm-hmm. So, they left the mausoleum and his house alone.
Okay.
As well as the comparatively new Helmerich Center for American Research, which was built immediately adjacent to the museum. So it was just the original museum that was demoed so that they could update.
Update and have a much more preservation friendly.
Yeah. You can't really mess around with art pieces.
No,
So.
art and manuscripts.
Yeah.
You need to have the climate controls.
Yeah. So, after that little art history lesson, if you will. Sorry, we don't issue credit hours. This does not count for your college credit.
I'll just go drink.
So, we will turn our attention to another museum, though. We are going to go to north central Oklahoma, to the small city of Alva. Now, it's here that, built in 1932, the Cherokee Strip Museum was originally the Alva General Hospital. The hospital closed in 1972 and was soon replaced by the Cherokee Strip Museum. The museum uses the building to showcase hundreds of historical artifacts related to the Cherokee Outlet, which is also known as the Cherokee Strip. It also features exhibits related to Oklahoma's land runs and boasts one of the best collection of pioneer exhibits and Indian art and artifacts in the state. It features 40 rooms displaying the history of Alva and the Cherokee Outlet, including an old schoolroom, a drugstore, a kitchen, an Indian room, a presidential room, an army room, and a prisoner of war camp. Visitors can partake in regular programming and educational events at the museum, with everything from blacksmithing workshops to living history demonstrations. Inside the one-room schoolhouse, the museum conducts the award-winning living history program, A Day at Rose High School. Throughout the school year, 3rd and 4th grade students from across the state can experience a school day set in 1910 rural Oklahoma. As was noted in the opening of the show, much of Oklahoma is land where Native people were forced to move after being pushed from the lands to the east of the Mississippi River. The Cherokee Strip was intended to be the land set aside for the Cherokee tribe as a result of this forceful relocation. Unfortunately for the Cherokee, a largely agricultural people, some of the other tribes did not recognize the borders that were agreed upon between the Cherokee and the U.S. government, and the Cherokee were often displaced from this territory by more aggressive native people. As a result, very few Cherokees resided in the Cherokee Strip for many years after its establishment. Yet another chapter of the region's complex and often tragic history. Since the Cherokee Strip Museum is housed in an old hospital, it has seen its fair share of death, and is reported to be haunted by patients who never had the opportunity to go home. Several people have reported strange lights and shadows moving around in the building at night, and there is a mysterious blood spot on the floor that refuses to be washed away. The hauntings were thought to have begun shortly after it was renovated and opened as a museum. Stories of unexplainable and sudden cold spots, as well as the sounds of ghostly whispering come from areas known to be empty, are among the most commonly reported activities here. The most well-known paranormal activity here is the piano revolves around the piano in the reception area. Many staff and visitors to the museum have heard the piano start to play on its own, but only when there is no one in the room. People who have heard the music have gone to check on who is making the noise, only to find that there is, in fact, nobody there. There are reports of seeing specters, shadow figures, and orbs. People have said they've seen objects move on their own and lights turning on and off by themselves. Some have experienced the touch of disembodied hands and heard voices, screaming, and all kinds of other creepy sounds. Ghost or no ghosts, we've got a great place here, and the ghost hunting has helped boost our economy, says Elaine Graybill, the business manager at the Cherokee Strip Museum. Many believe that the deceased patients of the Alva General Hospital haunt the museum. One of the hotspots could be the emergency room, says Graybill. There's been a lot of activity there. Others believe that there are spirits attached to the personal possessions of World War II prisoners of war, which are a part of the museum's collection. During World War II, Oklahoma was home to 8 prisoner of war compounds, one of which was constructed in Alva. These compounds held more than 20,000 captive Germans, and Camp Alva was the maximum security camp for Nazis and Nazi sympathizers. Graybill says that one of the museum's visitors claims to have had a paranormal encounter with the ghost of a German POW. Graybill also notes that the museum staff has experienced strange phenomena. During a paranormal investigation in 2016, the security guards spotted unexplained floating orbs on surveillance footage. She says, "We are entertained every day whether we have spirits or not. Of the dozens of investigations that we've had, no one has ever left disappointed." Sounds like a neat place to check out.
Alright, so we're going to move over to the south near the border with Texas to the city of Durant at the Fort Washita Historic Site and Museum. Now, it's run by the Chickasaw Nation. The Fort Washita Historic Site is noted as a strategic point on the frontier. In addition to being near the Red and the Washita rivers, there existed both an ancient north-south trail through the area. In the Indian Territory, this route was known as the Texas Road, leading from Missouri to Texas and beyond. In 1930, the Indian Removal Act dictated that 5 southern-based civilized tribes, the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, and the Cree, and Seminoles, were all ordered to be relocated to the Indian Territory. The Choctaw and the Chickasaws were moved to the southern part of the Indian Territory that had been claimed by other people for a long time. The Chickasaws soon found out that they would be harassed with constant raids by the other plain natives like the Comanche, the Wichita, the Caddo, and the Quaw. While the Chickasaws had security at Fort Townsend to protect them, the Chickasaws were open and vulnerable. Excuse me. Besides the unfriendly Native American tribes, there were also the Republic of Texas militia, the presence of traders and trappers, and interference by unscrupulous intruders who saw this land as their space and trapping ground. They did not recognize that the Congress had given away their land, and they received no compensation, nor were they even actually told about it. The need for a federal fort to keep the peace was apparent. So the Superintendent of Indian Affairs for the Western Territory, William Armstrong, took action in 1838 and requested that a War Department build a fort there by the Washita River. Construction of Fort Washita began in spring of 1842. Companies A and F of the 2nd Dragoons were the ones who built the structures needed, under the command of Captain George A. H. Lake. By 1558, Fort Washita was like a small city. A nearly continuous construction of permanent buildings began in 1943. Within 15 years, a hospital, a surgeon's quarters, barracks had all been constructed of stone in addition to the wooden structures. Other additions included amenities like a bowling alley, a bar, a library, a newspaper. Various companies of dragoons, infantry, and artillery garrisoned at the facility from its founding until it closed in 1858. A corral and stables on the hillside of the southwest of the fort supported cavalry operations. Cavalry comprised the bulk of the forces assigned to Fort Washita until the 1850s, when it served as the United States Army Field Artillery School. The cemetery was also probably needed for soldiers and civilians who died in the hospital or during conflicts or health conditions. A General Belknap, a commander of Fort Archbuckle, died on November 10th of 1851 on an ambulance near Fort Washita, bound for Fort Gibson to see his family. He was interred at Fort Washita. An outlaw by the name of Bean Starr died in the hospital here from wounds received during a shootout with authorities. Men who died in the battles with Native Americans, bandits, and Mexican War casualties were also buried here. Two other important tasks landed in the lap of Fort Washita, besides standing guard over the Texas frontier. It was a busy place during the Mexican-American War and perfect staging area for organization of supplies and troops. The average fort garrison of 150 troops increased to almost 2,000. The Mexican-American War ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, signed on February 2nd of 1848. During the 1850s, the fort was a bustling stop for travelers heading toward the California gold fields or to settle in the far western territories. Many chose the southern route to avoid the cold and the outbreak of disease prevalent along the northern route. As soon as new forts sprung up closer to trouble spots, the need for this fort at this location went away. It was abandoned in 1858, but was briefly reopened during a Comanche uprising and then abandoned a year later, but not for long. The Confederate Army moves in, and especially appreciated the hospital facilities that were located here to help take care of their wounded. Some soldiers died of their wounds and were buried in the Confederate cemetery established here. At the end of the Civil War, the Confederate soldiers burned it to the ground in August of 1865, but nobody else could use it, or so they thought. In 1870, Fort Washita was transferred to the U.S. Department of Interior, kept by the Chickasaw Nation. The grounds were allotted to the tribe members in the early 1900s. In 1962, the state of Oklahoma purchased the land and transferred it to the Oklahoma Historic Society, and restoration of the site began. It was added as a National Landmark Historic District in June 23rd of 1965, and the National Register of Historic Places on October 15th of 1966. With such a legacy, it's no surprise that people have reported some hauntings going on here. One of Fort Washita's most notorious spirits was known as Aunt Jane. Now, what makes her so interesting is the number of stories about who she was in life. What most of the stories agree is that Aunt Jane was murdered by having her head cut off sometime in the fort's early history between 1842 and 1861. That's a lot of time in there that we're not sure exactly when this happened.
Yeah.
He's drunk. He's adorable.
He's something.
Anyway, story number 1. Aunt Jane had buried her money to avoid being robbed by Confederate soldiers who came to the fort in 1861. Somehow, however, they got wind of her buried fortune and tried to torture it out of her.
Sorry.
When she refused, they cut her head off in frustration. She lost her head and her life, but not her fortune. Story 2. Aunt Jane was the wife of an officer stationed at the fort. She had an affair with another officer, and when her husband caught them in bed, he cut both their heads off with his sword and threw the heads in the river in a fit of rage. Story 3. Aunt Jane was a freed African woman who had come to the fort during the Civil War to spy on the Confederate soldiers during the time that they had charge of the fort. When the Confederate soldiers found out that she was a spy for the Union, they cut her head off with a sword and then buried her head and her body in separate unmarked graves. And story number 4. A rumor was circulating that Aunt Jane, the wife of an officer, always carried $20 in gold whenever she traveled. One day when she was returning from town, thieves jumped her, and one of them got mad and cut off her head, probably when they discovered she didn't have gold on her. It was just a rumor. They may have taken her head as a prize.
People are weird.
Regardless of the story, whichever one may or may not be true. Visitors have reported seeing Aunt Jane's headless apparition in a white gown floating near the fort ruins. Her apparition has been seen climbing up walls of the ruins, still looking for her head. Somehow, they have also seen her riding a horse, pell-mell, through the fort's ruins with her long, black, flowing hair behind her. But what's interesting is that her head, well, let's just say, it's not there. It's just the hair.
Oh no, she has her head in that figure.
Yeah, but they can't see her face.
Right.
Yeah, so just the hair. You can't see here.
Yeah, but that may make it somebody else altogether.
Yeah. Anyway, as time goes on.
It was like Grand Central Station for settlers over the years.
Yeah. Aunt Jane's hauntings have taken on a menacing aura at times. It seems she wanted some amongst the living to leave her turf alone, so she became a menacing pest. She haunted Dr. Stalkup and his family who lived in the home that Jane also claims as her own. Jane's most frightening action was to occasionally possess young Molly, who was the child of Dr. Stalkup. One night, Aunt Jane's apparition went too far and threatened to cut off all of Molly's hair. While Mrs. Stalkup kneeled in fervent and intense prayer, Jane backed down and left Molly alone after that.
Sure.
Not a chew toy. Anyway, treasure seekers have never found Jane's rumored money, by the way. Some just think that she's not happy because people are digging up what they see as federal property. It's been reported that an unseen force stops some treasure hunter pickaxes from even touching the ground. This could be the spirit of General Belknap, who could be restless because he died before seeing his family, and he's buried in a place he had never seen when he was alive. He may need to feel the need to protect the fort from damage by greedy individuals. After the Choctaw tribe was deeded the property in 1870 by the Department of the Interior, the Chickasaw native by the name of Charles Colbert rebuilt many of the barracks, making one of them into a home for his family and their 32 dogs. 32. That's a lot of dogs.
Yeah.
Anyway, it seems a spirit or two didn't approve of having 32 dogs in the home, and the doors would inexplicably be open and letting all the dogs run free. Apparently, Charles got the message and moved the family off the property. Spirits or no spirits, they seem to have gotten rid of Colbert, moved their plan up a little bit. Then a doctor named Steele and his sister were the next tenants of the rebuilt barracks. His sister's responsibility included keeping the home. It wasn't long before she witnessed a mischievous paranormal activity going on. Objects were moving around, doors and windows were opening and closing, and being touched by unseen hands. Well, let's just say she had a nervous breakdown and they moved off the fort as well. The Bonheim cabin is located just west of the fort and apparently has been claimed by a spirit of a person with extremely rude manners and a strong desire to chase the living out of the cabin by making it an unpleasant experience. 2 female members of a living history group who were reenactors were assigned to sleep in this cabin. One of them woke and felt like somebody was trying to strangle her. The other one woke up and felt an unseen presence hovering over her. The third female reenactor later joined the 2 women in the cabin, and that night all 3 of them had nightmares about being smothered. That's when you leave. Don't. My pillow. The green apparition is thought to be a spectral soldier, and it was seen walking from the barracks to the stables by a bunch of students. Spirits of Union or Confederate soldiers may have been the ones who let the dogs out, perhaps not happy to have a building that they lived in or had burned down, leaving the fort rebuilt and used as a home. They may have been mischief makers that drove off the sister of Dr. Steele and made her go over the mental waterfall. Spirits of the Confederate soldiers may be the special force that burned down the rebuilt southern barracks and they had done earlier when they were still alive. I mean,
As you do.
there's a lot going on there.
A whole heck of a lot going on there. Grand Central Station for spooky stuff.
But yeah, I agree with Patrick. 32 dogs. I'll pet some of them, but no, we're not living with that many.
And sorry if you're hearing all kinds of crinkling in the background. Nico has found a bag.
With horror books.
Full of horror books. There was a cool thing. It was this past weekend, Friday and Saturday at the Barnes & Noble over at Libby Place. They had a mini author convention, horror author convention called Halloween Hangover.
Yeah.
So it was the second time that they've done it. I completely missed the first time.
But we bought books.
We did. Of course we did. Because we did.
Including 2 research books.
Yep. But Patrick also pointed out, and it is bad. It's like, why do all these infidelity stories, why do they always end in murder? It's like, well, this is a ghost story show. I suppose the ones that end in them peacefully going their separate ways don't necessarily.
They don't get caught.
They don't get, and they don't really turn into ghost stories per se. So yeah, you got a lot of kind of high intensity on the
emotional scale here.
On the grim side of things here. But as we do have one last stop for this evening. So
thank you, because my nose is stuffy. Sorry, I'm like having trouble breathing now.
yeah. But we are.
My pillow. See, my pillow.
Okay. Gonna go back to the northeast corner of the state, to the city of Pawhuska. Here you'll find the headquarters of the Osage Nation, along with many reminders of the native people's heritage and what life was like on the frontier. One such reminder can be found with the Constantine Theater, one of the oldest working theaters in Oklahoma. Located on Main Street and listed on the National Register of Historic Places, this historic theater is not only beautiful in nature, but also has quite a history of hauntings. Some sources state that the Constantine Theater was originally built as the Hotel Pawhuska in the 1880s. Others say that it was built in the mid-1890s. Either way, it was one of the first permanent buildings in downtown Pawhuska. In 1911, Charles Constantine, a Greek businessman from Constantinople, was drawn to Pawhuska at the start of the oil boom. He first opened a small bake and sweet shop in Pawhuska, then he snapped up the Pawhuska House Hotel after it suffered a fire. Constantine took to renovating the fire-damaged building into a grand theater that came to be known for its remarkable acoustics. The original structure became the lobby, the restrooms, the ticket and concession counters. A large theater stage and prop fly were added along with dressing rooms and offices. It opened in December of 1914 and proceeded to entertain the residents of Pawhuska and the surrounding area for the next 12 years with a variety of live events, including circus acts, opera productions, and even boxing matches. Unfortunately, Constantine was forced to sell the theater in 1926 as his health was failing. Although the building remained to be used as a theater, it was converted to show films, and the name was changed to the Kehaka Theater by its new owner, A.M. Abbott's. It ran as a movie theater until its last showing in 1974. After this, the building sat vacant for the next 10 years. The following decade was a dark one for Pawhuska. The city lost about a third of its population, and the city's morale was flagging along with its historic structures. A group of Pawhuska's citizens banded together to save the community both physically and emotionally. The Constantine Theater became a focal point for that effort, and restoration began in 1987 with volunteers and the high school carpentry class. It was a monumental effort, but the community persisted and was able to reopen the Constantine Theater in 1991 as a recognized structure on the National Register of Historic Places. Current productions at the Constantine Theater include plays, classic films, music shows, comedy acts, and more. It's the oldest operating theater in the state and one of the most haunted places you'll find. Although the theater's history itself is quite interesting, the history of paranormal activity makes it even more unique. Before it was a theater, in its hotel days, right outside the doors of the hotel, a man by the name of Dan Parker was murdered by gunshot. Since then, there have been several reports of what sound like phantom gunshots captured on audio at the theater. Even the theater's historian, Garnet Hartness, has encountered paranormal activity firsthand, hearing doors slam when alone in the theater. During the extensive renovations to the theater, some of the volunteers and students reported seeing the ghost of a beautiful young woman garbed in a button-down dress. Some claim she's Sappho Constantine Brown, the daughter of George Constantine. At the time of the renovation, the ghost sightings made waves, as the Tulsa World newspaper wrote an article with a headline, "Theater Believed Haunted. Townspeople say spirit galvanizing efforts to revive business." Even when not seen, the workers would report hearing spectral footsteps on the stage, along with other inexplicable sounds throughout the building. While many favor the idea that the ghost is that of Sappho, some point to another woman from the building's past, Emma, or Emily perhaps, who may have been a proprietor of the Pawhuska House Hotel in the late 1890s. Regardless of who the woman is, she has continued to be seen in the theater by patrons today and was cited by authors Eileen Robson and Diane Halicki in their book Haunted Highway, The Spirits of Route 66. Apparently, the ghost has a liking for seat number 4, where she is seen most often. Vanessa Roos, with the Constantine Arts Council Trust Authority, says that the building's spirited nature, building's spirited nature, you just feel it, and you can feel it in this place. She recalls sighs she heard over a microphone, even though the microphone was off. This was confirmed by Serena Jeffers, who described her own experience with a microphone on stage. It was like a but louder. So then I turned the microphone off. It was by my side, but then I heard it again. 4 different paranormal investigators have investigated the theater, and none of them have left disappointed. These formal investigations come on top of the countless workers and patrons that have seen ghosts, strange noises, and paranormal activity. During an investigation in 2015, visiting paranormal researchers claimed to have heard a woman singing from inside the empty auditorium as they were performing experiments beneath the Constantine stage. While conducting experiments in the theater's green room, 2 of the investigators, including the group's founder, Dave Glidden, said that they heard the singing from just outside. When they went up into the dark and abandoned auditorium, however, the singing had stopped. Later, when the team reviewed the audio recordings, a voice was heard to clearly say, "Come get me," as the researchers headed out from under the stage. Attempts to establish further contact was mixed. When asked if she was not being allowed to leave, a negative response was reportedly ascertained. An affirmative reply was received to the question, "Are you stuck in the theater?" So, the spirit of the theater is alive and well at the Constantine Theater. And perhaps there is another spirit at work there, a soul whose love for the stage goes on and on. Cheers, everybody.
Yep. All right, so we are going away from the state theme for our next one because Black Friday's coming up, so I thought I should do a haunted shopping one.
Yes. So I haven't even had a look at that script yet, so I'm curious to see what it is that you pulled together.
I have enough for 2.
Oh, okay.
So I focus mostly on just individual stores, including grocery stores, because Thanksgiving's coming up. You need to go to a grocery store as well.
All right. So haunted stores.
Yes.
Haunted shopping.
Haunted shopping. And I do have several haunted malls, but it won't be on this script. It'll be on another one.
Okay. And then we are dedicating the month of December to some classic, fictional
ghost stories.
Ghost
And
stories.
these are ones that are American. We've been focusing on British ones before.
Yep. So we've
but
done
these are ones I have found that they were printed in American newspapers.
So yeah, we featured we featured Dickens. We featured Jerome K. Jerome.
Yep.
Who's the gentleman that wrote the Kit Bag? Still my favorite. in any case, doesn't really matter right at this moment. It was that is what December is going to be. We're going to have 2 shows back to back with some fictional ghost stories, still from the Victorian era, right?
Algernon Blackwood.
Algernon Blackwood, that's right. But still Victorian.
Yeah, still Victorian era.
But American authors.
But American authors.
So we got a couple of shows for that in December, and then who knows?
I haven't figured out what January is yet.
Well, we will see what brings in the new year. But in any case, so yeah, we'll because of the schedule the way it is, and our personal schedule for that matter, we'll be back in 2 weeks, just in time for Thanksgiving and Black Friday. But then we will be off for 3 weeks because we will be doing a little travel and stuff like that. But then we will be back for back-to-back weeks with those Victorian era American Christmas ghost stories.
Yep.
So that is the plan through really the end of the year, and then 2024 will be upon us.
It will.
But anyways, so yeah, we'll be back to talk to y'all again in 2 weeks' time, and my brain just went to mush. I don't know if it ever stopped being mush.
We are going to be at Virginia Comic Con on the 19th.
Yes. So not this coming Saturday, but the Saturday after that, is the 18th.
18th.
So Saturday, November 18th, we will be at Virginia Comic Con at the Raceway. So if you want to go ahead and get your tickets, you can come see us and a whole lot of other awesome vendors and some awesome cosplay and all kinds of fun stuff.
Yep.
So definitely recommend you come on up, check that out. Of course, we do have our tour availability basically every night. So if you go check out our calendar, you can take advantage of one of the book your own tour or choose your own tour availabilities. Or if you don't see a choose your own tour, well, sign up for the tour that's scheduled for that night.
Yep.
So we'll be.
And just remember the choose your own tour. You have to book it 48 hours in advance.
Yep. So. Yeah, we wound up having tonight off because nobody took advantage of the choose your own tour for tonight. But, yeah, we basically had, again, as Beth said, right up through last night, we had ghost tours every night since the 1st of October. So, it's been a run. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I could ramble on for a while, I'm sure.
Yeah, but we don't need to.
No. We'll spare y'all that. Spare y'all me just flapping my lips for the sake of flapping my lips. But anyways, hope that you enjoyed the stories tonight. I know that that was just kind of tip of the iceberg. I mean, we didn't even get into, we had the one story from Tulsa, which was really kind of on the outskirts.
Yeah,
of
but
Tulsa.
we didn't even get into a lot of major cities. So.
Yeah, well, there's 2 major cities. There's Tulsa and there's Oklahoma City. And that's it. And before you ask about any stories from that little narrow strip of nebulous land that's just kind of out there on the western part of Oklahoma, don't. There's nothing there. Absolutely nothing. Less than 1% of the state's population lives in that entire strip. It is a vast stretch of nothingness out there. So, yeah. Just want to go ahead and put that out there. Because I've always been curious about that strip of land. But there's nothing there. Absolutely nothing there.
Yeah.
If you're watching this show from that strip of land, please send us a note. Let us know what's actually there. Because from what I can tell, it's nothing.
Anyway, with that, we will let you all go for the evening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good night, y'all.
Good night, y'all. Thanks for watching.